And each one of you, I wish I would just learn all your names so that I could establish this conversation with you because I don't like monologues. I'm really a communication person and I like that interaction with people. And so where do I start? I think where I start is with the thought that everything that happens is just part of our journey, right? On this earth. And as we go, when we look back, we realize that it's incomplete. We still have, I mean, as long as we're here, we still have path to go. We still have things to experience and things to do. And that's why the story that I have to tell you today, it's impossible to tell it to you like, as if it were a PowerPoint presentation or some sort of a graphic novel. I am glad that Dan was able to help me with the pictures. So I sent him the pictures and he very kindly ordered them so it would make sense in a timeline. One thing that Claudine is going to do, and I apologize because I'm going to sometimes turn to talk in the third person to just, be realistic about who is Claudine. And Claudine was born in Switzerland. However, my parents were Swiss. My father was Swiss and my mother was from Italian parents. And they met in Switzerland. They were very young. And after a short time of being together, they decided that they wanted to immigrate. They didn't want to stay. That was after the war. That was around 1950, even earlier, maybe 1945. And my father soon got a job in Peru, in the first milk factory in the north of Peru. And he was an accountant at the milk factory. So he saved up money for 2 years. And then when he was done saving enough, he sent my mom a ticket and he said, come and marry me. Sent her a boat ticket. And my mom promptly got on the boat and crossed the Atlantic Ocean and went and married my dad. And they were living in the north of Peru in a little town called Chiclayo. And 2 years after, my mom got pregnant. And when she was 7 months pregnant, she decided with my dad that I was not going to be born in Peru, but I was going to be born in Zurich. So my mom hopped up on the boat again in the seventh, 8th month and traveled all around across the Atlantic Ocean to Switzerland just in time to give birth to that little baby. And 2 months later, I was in one of the first flights of the Swiss Air that crossed again over to South America to Peru. So ever since, that's marked my life. It's been travel from one side to the other. I can remember that one of my first memories that I have was waking up and I was on top of a plane. And I don't know what language it was. I just know the concept that I felt in this little head of this baby was, oh, I'm back. That feeling, okay, I'm back. And so it started. I grew up part in Peru, and then my parents moved to Mexico. And we went to Switzerland. I studied art at art college. I studied design and costume design, and then went back to Peru and finished university in Peru, where I studied languages and later became an interpreter that I worked for 17 years in the United States. So that's it. How does that connect to the Rama mission, how it was called? What is Rama mission?
Yes.
Rama was or is still a group in Peru that is probably one of the largest contact group, ET contact group that has formed because there were an amazing number of members in Peru. It did not, for those that know a little bit of the story of Rama, it did not start with Sixto Paz, although the story, if you would go onto the internet and kind of look, what is Rama, the Rama group, and who was Sixto. The internet and artificial intelligence is going to tell you, oh, there was a youngster, his name was Sixto Paz, and he started doing psychographic communication. He established communication with the being named Oxalc and so forth. But the story starts much earlier because we're talking about Peru. And Peru is just, the truth is, Peru is just a magical country. I mean, I love Peru. I love everything about Peru. Even the difficult times in Peru have just been, for me, really eye-opening experiences because the quality of the Peruvian heart is just so, they're so warm and they're so generous and they're so kind and they're so friendly that to me, Peru has always been a home. But interestingly is that in Peru, there's always been an extraterrestrial presence. I cannot tell you, I mean, you can go back maybe thousands of years back, and there's always going to be some trace of some extraterrestrial intelligence that left some mark or some myth or some story in the history of Peru. But in relation to the Rama group, I would say that in the 1960s, let's start with the 1960s, there was a big influx of Croatian ex-Yugoslavia immigrants that came to Peru. And interestingly enough, these Yugoslavians, they had gone through a lot of, like difficulties because they came out of, of Croatia, what was ex-Yugoslavia, and they had to flee from Yugoslavia because they were fighting with the Serbians and all these issues that they had, but they were very sensitive people. And they came to Peru, and I got to meet one of them that was called Zvonko Kranjček, that became kind of my tutor or my mentor, I would rather say. He was the father of a couple of friends of mine, and he was a beautiful, beautiful person that helped me a lot understand my own process. So these gentlemen had a very strong vein connection to the ETs. And in 1960s, one of these Yugoslavians, his name was Vito Kapetanovic, he wrote a book about the Apunians, from the beings from Apu. Many of the extraterrestrials that appeared during the 50s, 60s, and 70s in Peru were humanoid ETs. So when I became a member of Rama, I had never heard about grays or any sorts of extraterrestrials with any other. For me, all the extraterrestrials were a humanoid because that's what I knew. I didn't know anything else, and it was always a positive experience in every regard. There's always a joy and an excitement to follow the news. I became a very avid reader of Erik von Däniken. You know who Erik von Däniken is, from Ancient Aliens in the 70s. Because my parents were lovely parents. They were, till the last day that they lived in 2020 when they parted, they were together as a couple, taking care of one another, and they were an example to me what love in a marriage is. But they were also very conservative people. And you can imagine having a daughter like Claudine that was very artistic and kind of psychic and really weird. She was a strange girl. It was very difficult for my dad, he being an accountant. And my mom was a lovely lady. She was beautiful and she was totally devoted to my dad. And just having this daughter was not easy. So I grew up with the idea that my parents were not really my parents. Even as a child, I thought that, how is it possible that these people are my parents? I just don't feel that they're my parents. And started to have OBs, out of body experiences, and all those. That was my world. I didn't have a name for them. I just knew that those things happened. and they happened to me, and that was my refuge, my escape from that world that was around me, because I was growing up in Mexico in the 60s. And in school, I went to an American school in Mexico City, and school was not easy for me because you know what's that called when you see numbers and colors and synesthesia?
Yeah.
Synesthesia, when you feel, that you feel a sensation and it has a color and it has a number. So the teacher would be teaching like linear, like 6 and 2 makes such and such. And when she would say the numbers, I would see like green and red and would hear sounds. And it was very difficult for me to explain that. So I'm not going to go long into the story how difficult school was for me, because I was always kind of being sent to sit on the back, although I was this little, very skinny little girl that was very little, tiny, and had to sit in a classroom with 50 people. But anyway, so I was very happy when school was ended. And then I went to Switzerland to study in art school till 1974, when I returned to Peru. I am going to start with the story of Juan Octavio Acervo, and I'm going to ask you, Daniel, if we could show those images. We are talking about Misión Rama, which is the contact with the Rama guides. That's right, 1971. So in 1971 is when I went to Switzerland to study. I was in art school and art college. And I came back in 1974, just the time when Sixto Paz, this youngster that was having psychographic communication with the guys, that was in 1974. So, but in 1970, there was this young student, his name was Juan Acervo, was a young student, a Peruvian. He was son of a lady by the name of Maruja Soler. He was in New York, and his parents called him and said, Juancito, please come back to Lima. You need to come back. We need to have you here, your father and I. So Juan took, the trip back to Peru. And when he was back, he knew that his mother was, actually, she was kind of a medium. She was very psychic and had these abilities, psychic abilities. And one day they saw an ad in the newspaper, in a local newspaper, that was announcing the IPRI, which is the Instituto de Relaciones Interplanetarias. That is the Institute for Interplanetary Relations. And they got very curious. So Maruja, the mother of Juan, told him, why don't you go and see this institute? Because I'm really very interested. I would like to learn more about these ETs and all these beings. So Juan went to the center of Lima. He took, the bus, went to Lima, and then realized that the address was really in the center, downtown of Lima, and it was in a vegetarian restaurant. And there in the corner, on a little table seated, was a gentleman by the name Carlos Paz, who was the father of Sixto and Charlie, to whom I'm going to tell you more about in a little bit. So Juan, who is here in the picture, established a communication with Mr. Paz, who explained to him that, yes, the IPRI was signed up as an official organism, an institute and everything. So he went back and they introduced one another with Maruja, the mother. And so they started going every Wednesday to Carlos Paz's home, and they would have meetings, and they would have like conversations about esoteric and philosophical. They would read books together. And one day in 1971, Maruja all of a sudden stops the group and says, hey, why are we reading all these books about things that happen in other countries with other people? Why don't we do something to have contact with these beings here? And they said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I don't know, just give me a piece of paper and a pencil. So they gave her a pen and a pencil, and she looked at the paper for a moment, in silence. And all of a sudden she starts writing, because her question was like, where could we meet these beings? And the word appeared, Papa Leon. And Papa Leon is a location like 60 kilometers south from Lima. And at that time in the 70s, there was like a beach location where people go and spend their summers. And it was very rustical. So don't even think that there was like even street lights. It was like there wasn't a paved road. There was just like little brick and houses. And they were very tiny, maybe one or two rooms they had, but they were just in front of the enormous Pacific Ocean, which was, an extension. Is very much like a little bit. Lima is like San Diego, that kind where you have the Humboldt Current and that and mine. It's very beautiful. It's very raw and very wild. So it's not like your Caribbean beach, but it's a very powerful scenery. So they had this communication, Papa Leon. So they were curious. So she did the communication again, and it was confirmed that they would have a communication with her. A couple of weeks later, it was going to be the anniversary of the IPRI, the Institute for Interplanetary Relations, and Mr. Carlos Paz asked Maruja if they could maybe celebrate the anniversary at Papa Leon, where the Acervos had their little house. And she said, yeah, why don't you come, and then maybe we can make a meeting there and we could try having contact and so forth. And so they went, and they took like the little hot dogs and things, and they were around like, and Sixto and Charlie, they were Mr. Paz's sons. They were university students. They were in college. I think there's Sixto and Charlie. So they too went down to the beach, and they were just having their little juices and eating, when all of a sudden they hear a noise on the road, and they see a huge caravan of cars approaching the house. Somehow the rumor, or somebody had told somebody that there was going to be a sighting in Papa Leon, and people got really excited, and they contacted their cousins and sisters and brothers and friends, and everybody got together, and they all went the 60 kilometers down on the road to Papa Leon to see if they could see something there. And there was a huge commotion of people that were taking out their beach chairs and sitting, and they had their beers and like their sandwiches and everything. They were sitting, and it was in the evening. It was around 8:30, and all of a sudden they see from the horizon of the Pacific Ocean, they see three lights approaching. And everybody, oh, look at those lights. What is that? What's happening? And they see that the lights are growing and they're approaching. And all of a sudden they had like three lentils, like big white lentils, flying over the houses, the little houses in Papa Leon. People stood up and everybody started screaming at the top of their lungs. And they were so scared because they had never experienced, of course, nothing like that. And they had not even expected that they were going to be experiencing anything of that kind. So the evening ended, the crafts disappeared, and everybody went back to Lima. So at that time, Sixto and Charlie were already talking about 1974. They started to do their own psychographic communications. That's when they started. And
psychographic means like automatic writing. Is that correct?
Thank you for interrupting me. And my apologies that I'm talking so, because I'm trying to. I was telling Daniel that this week gathering all this information has been like a huge download for me, because a lot of the information I had kind of, it's been how many years ago? It's been a long time. And although I still have contact with the people, it's not like I'm thinking back what I experienced in 1974 and so forth. I just have a general memory, but p- getting all these pictures has really, really moved and stirred a lot of things and questions in me regarding why do we have these experiences? And especially for me, what did it mean to me? Why did I have to be there? What did it mean to me then? And so, anyway, I had just come back from Switzerland from art school, and I had a couple of experiences, out of body experiences, where I'm not going to go too much into that because it's going to make it too long. But I did have a very strong and powerful experience that took me to the future. And I was shown what, not just what was going to happen in the planet, because it was more relevant to, you personal, what are you going to be doing? What do you want to be doing in the future? That kind of an experience. So when that experience finished, I was like, what was that? Did I really experience that, or did I dream that, or what was that? It was like, it was when you have this cognitive dissonance kind of thing, because you know that you did experience it, but it's something that you've never experienced before, and you cannot put it in any, you cannot label it, you cannot name it. And it was pretty confusing to me for a time, until more or less that was like in 77, where I was at my parents' home in Lima, Miraflores, and they lived in a building, like 15-story building. My parents had an apartment on the 12th floor, and it was December the 24th, just on Christmas Eve. And you know that in South America, December and Christmas is summertime. So it was a beautiful afternoon, and I was looking out of the window, and I could see the cars that were passing by, and I was thinking, man, I had this experience. When will I finally understand what I experienced? I really need to know that what I experience is true and not just my imagination. I had started to think that I had just dreamed it. And the moment that I was thinking, I need to know, I need to confirm that what I experienced was not a dream, I feel something moving on top of my head, but on my head, on the building, the building, the house. I see something coming through like this, and I look up, and it was a huge craft, and it had just appeared on top of of my head of the building. The moment that I was asking myself, I need a confirmation that what I experienced is true. And then I went into kind of a semi-shock, because I couldn't put a name to what I was watching, what I was seeing. It was so powerful, and it was so beautiful, because the thing was also, it was, what there's now called the pentablack, that they use in space technology, that is a substance that blocks, there's no reflection of light, and it makes it seem, when you paint an object with that paint or that substance, it makes it look like it's two-dimensional, so you cannot see the whole form. You can just see the outline of the object. And that's the way it was. It was not blinking, it was making no sound, it was not vibrating. It was just like magnificent there on top. And I said, oh no, I called my mom and my boyfriend and a friend of my mom. They were in the kitchen preparing dinner for Christmas. They came running into the living room, and we looked out to the window, how this beautiful object just sailed in the sky and went approximately like 20 minutes until, I mean, they went back to the kitchen. I stayed just glued to the window, just observing this beautiful, beautiful object until it disappeared in the horizon direction north-south, from north to south into the Pacific, not into the ocean, but into the sky, until it just disappeared. And parallel to that, I had found a little ad that Sixto had written on a magazine. It was like esoteric magazine. It was the only esoteric magazine in Lima that was called Lo Insólito. And Sixto had written a little ad where he was inviting people to join him to a conference that he was going to give a talk about contacts with ETs. And just going back to 74, when Sixto and both Charlie were having psychographic communications because they wanted to continue with this interesting experiment of contacting with extraterrestrial intelligence, it became such a constant that they were constantly asking for communication and sightings. And a good friend of mine, Rose, she was also friends with Maruja and Juan. And she got a communication one day where the guides, we call them guides, told her to please tell Sixto and Charlie that they had to stop, what they were doing. They had to change that conduct because they just felt that they were too attached, they were too dependent, and constantly, and they didn't see that as something positive. And they said, look, you better tell them that, they changed it because otherwise we're going to have to break the communication. We're going to have to go. And that really happened. I mean, that group of ETs or ET intelligence disappeared. And at that time, Charlie went to Brazil because he had problems at home. He left home. There was a big commotion at the boss's home. And there was like a void. So at that time, Sixto thought, well, my brother is gone to Brazil. My father is with the IPRI doing his thing. And I'm just going to continue doing communications. So in 77, he opens his own group and starts telling the story that he's, the first to have communication. That's the official story. Yeah. So everything that I told you before didn't exist. So when I saw that ad, I called him. That was on the 24th of December. And I was at his home for this talk that he was going to give in just a week later after New Year's Eve. And there was a big group we were all teenagers, a couple of parents were there, girls and boys, young people, college students, and some kids. And so Sixto invited us to join him if we were interested in to study the subject of the ET contact. And he also mentioned that the ET guides had left him a protocol. And the protocol was exercises that the members that were joining the group would do to develop their, like their mental powers and so forth, just to prepare them for this journey that we were going to do together of doing communications and contacts with these guides. So a month later, they had named me instructor for the protocol because it happened that I had done, the Silva Mind training. It used to be called the mind control training, the Silva mind control, and other stuff. So, I volunteered. I want to be the instructor for this. So I memorized the protocol and I was instructing the kids on, how to concentrate, how to breathe, and how to do meditations and so forth. And then it started. We started to meet basically every week with Sixto, and the communications really started to come. And the first group sighting that we had was in Easter of 1979. And we were told that we would have to go to this beach that was also in the south of Lima. We were 280 people, kids and teenagers and their parents and everything. And we camped at the beach that Easter weekend, and we were going to have scheduled sightings. We were going to get what was called the cosmic names. And we were going to listen to this, we were going to get the cesium crystals. It's something I'm going to explain later, but I mean, there was a whole thing, a list of things that we were going to experience. And we were all excited. We went down to the beach, and that time, it's very rustical. I showed the picture. Maybe you can show that, Dan, if you may, the pictures when we were at the beach. It's very rustical. So you can see the girl that is turning to the screen. That's Claudine right there. Can you see her? So our tents were like this, and we would like go into the desert, walk for maybe an hour, 2 hours, and we would just have our little, water bottle. There's Sixto in the center with his gallon container where we had magnetized the water, and we were drinking magnetized, and we carrying our bananas and apples, like really very, very rustical. You can see those beach tents in the back. And they were not really very helpful when it was cold, because when there was wind, they would just like flatter and move in the air. And when we would sleep, we would kind of dig like this. These would sleep in our sleeping bags very close together. But it was very exciting for all of us because it was a huge adventure for all of us. More so than if you think what was happening in Peru at the time. That was at the start of the 80s when the Shining Path, if you've heard the terrorist group, the Shining Path, was starting to become really active in Peru. And that meant that it was dangerous. It was not an easy thing to just grab your rucksack and then go down the road and somewhere into the desert, because the terrorists were blowing the light towers, electricity towers. There were car bombs and things, but we would just, somehow we were really on another planet, because we were just so focused on having this experience and communication with these beautiful beings that were giving us these beautiful communications. And there's one communication that I remember the most, because there are several chapters in the development of the mission. Was the first part, which was the really big crafts and the humanoid beings that were being seen everywhere. And then it became a little bit more subtle. The vibration changed. And the vibration was the following. I remember Sixto getting one of the communication that has stuck with me today, that said, we are aware that you're very interested and delighted with the ET phenomena. You love the craft, and that's why you're here. But we want to tell you that this is not why we are here. We are here to wake you up. And we wish for you that you look into yourselves and you find yourself. This is our ultimate purpose. We cannot do it for you. You're going to have to do it. So we're going to give you like with the protocol guide that they gave us what to do, and the exercise, and they even told become vegetarians, and we were doing yoga on the beach and all that stuff. I mean, we're really becoming really very healthy. And so we always have like one or two craft that would come. Sometimes it was just lights. Sometimes it was, imagine you're in the middle of the desert and it's 2 a.m. and you're going to have like what they call the cesium crystals. They were like little cones that would appear in the palm. So we would stand in a big circle. Imagine like 150 or 50 teenagers that are standing in a circle, and we're all standing there with our hands stretched out like this. And my job was to be checking on the kids to see when they would appear, because you could see like this, like how do I call it? Like a little light, little cone that would appear. And these were the cesium crystals, which had the purpose of helping us integrate the violet light, but also to kind of be like an antenna to be in communication with them. And this is the illustration that I did. It's called Los Cristales de Cesio, which was an Easter of '79, which I just told you a couple of minutes ago when we were there. and we were standing in circles, and the two cones or triangles that appeared in the palms of of our of our hands, when we put them on our chest, would integrate into the form of the six-pointed star. That's a whole another story to tell, but I'm going to continue with the story of Rama. So we are going and we're having all these experiences. Can you show more of the? Are there any more pictures of the beach, Dan, that we're having on Chilca? Chilca was the name of the location.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. And the cosmic name was the vibration. That's what they told us. The vibration of our spiritual name in a time when we first had, as a being or as a person, achieved self-awareness. And these names, these cosmic names, had different endings, like or air, and that's the way we were sleeping. We would dig, and we would all like get really together with our sleeping bags and cover up, because in Peru, it's in the coastline. The coastline is very arid. It doesn't have any trees or palm trees. It's deserted. But in the summer, it's tremendously hot. And in the winter, especially at night, it gets really, really cold. So we didn't have really, like camping gear and stuff like that. This is a more recent picture, but we had these tents from the first picture, and we just felt like we were experiencing something very special. So after some time, let me just pick up where did I. What happened next is that Sixto started to become, that had always been so. Sixto, the difference between the two brothers was that Charlie was more like a technological. He was more interested in the, in the technical aspect of the contact. But Sixto was more of a religious guy. And in a true sense, I mean, he was more, I mean, all the communications that he was getting were like on a Christian note. And this became increasingly so that we were all kind of this vibration that I could observe. And although I was very young and I didn't know anything of anything at all, I was very aware of what was going on. And at first I went on with that and supported him, because I didn't like to be in the front. I always liked to be in the back, kind of doing things. Like we started doing theater presentations because Sixto thought that would be a good way to earn some money and do some charity for different, like, for example, it was the Mother Teresa home for the sickly, or the hospice for the, I hadn't thought there was a desert in Peru. Oh yes, there's a huge, all the coast of Peru is all desert. So here are pictures of one of the theater plays that we did. That was the Brother, Sun, Sister Moon, the life of Saint Francis. And that was a huge undertaking, because most of us, we were not, I mean, I was dancing. I was a dance student, and I was dancing in a group. But all the group, and I had studied design, costume design. So they just said, you're going to do the costume design and the scenography design, and you're going to do the dancing part, of the harem of the, when Saint Francis goes to see I can't remember the name of them. Sorry. He goes to the East, and you know the story of Saint Francis. Do you know the story of Saint Francis? Somebody?
Yes.
He goes to visit, and because he has a dream. Because what he dreamt was that he was going to be able to bring together the East with the West. And with that, he was dreaming about the Islam and Christianism. That's why he went to see the, can't remember the name of who was this is not the king. He was,
Sultan.
thank you, the Sultan. He went to see the Sultan. So here you can see the Sultan, and there's Claudine. She's standing there, and so you knew the dances, but it was like a huge undertaking because a theater director came to direct us, and I designed the costume for 60 actors, and just with one lady, we had a factory that was like a textile with the fabrics. They gave us the fabrics to do the costumes. So we Claudine with the lady, we did costumes for 60 actors, and we did this incredible presentation of my brother, son, and you can see Sixtus right there with his wife, Marinita. That's his wife. And these are all friends. These were all people that were part of the group of Rama. And so I was doing that. I was happy because I was doing what I really love. And then Sixto started to write his books, and Claudine did all the illustrations for his books. And then Claudine did the illustrations for the magazine, the Lo Insólito, that started to publish the experiences of the Rama group, the interest started to grow, and I did the illustrations for those magazines. So I was just full into that, so much that I was not really aware what was happening within the group. And what was happening within the group is that, as in all human groups, there started to be like tensions, like also a little bit of jealousies, who is more communicating and who has the better communications, and who is more friends with Sixto and who's more friends with this and that. And I was busy doing my stuff, but then when I started to see this, I started to realize, no, this is not what I really am interested in. I am interested in the communication that we had, that I want to look within myself and find myself. That's what I really want to do. And seeing the crafts and seeing the ETs, and they were saying, you have to get prepared because we're going to have a physical contact. And we would be like weeks preparing and fasting, and then they would say, no, we're not coming because you're not ready yet, we're not going to come, and so forth. And then I said, that's it. In 1983, I talked to my friend Zvonko Kranjček, the Yugoslavian gentleman that I mentioned at the end, and he said, look, Claudine, if you're really interested in developing your inner self, I am going to put you in contact with somebody, a friend of mine, and you can join them and you can start doing meditations and so forth. And I did. So I separated from the group, left the group. And in 1984, my son Ian was born. And in 85, my husband and I, we left Peru because the situation with the Shining Path had become so dangerous. And my ex-husband was an engineer, and he was traveling a lot in the countryside, and that's where, they were kidnapping engineers, and it was very, very dangerous. So my parents told us, you need to leave Peru. And I was so sad because I was so happy, really, doing all these things and being involved in all this social work and all these beautiful friends that I had. I said, I don't want to leave, but the risk was just too big. So we left in 85. And a lot of things happened, and I didn't go back to Peru because in the meantime, I was in the United States, where from 2000 till 2016, I worked I did the court interpreter, was a judicial interpreter for immigration with the Alexandria Public Defender's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office, doing work with them, because mostly it was working with undocumented immigrants. and in the jail. And it was a beautiful work. I loved working. It sounds so strange to say I love going to the jail to work with these people, because many of them were, you know, didn't even speak the language, and they were grateful when somebody would come and talk to them in their language. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. But after 2016, I really started to feel that I was very, very tired. And my parents were aging. My mom was with Alzheimer's, and my dad was in a wheelchair. And I thought, I'm going to go and spend some time with them in Lima. I just felt this is what I want to do before they go. So I went to Peru, and from 2016 to 2020, when COVID started, it was again, I went back and met my friends from the Rama time, and I was very, very surprised to see that, especially the core group, it's approximately like 60, 80 of these friends, close friends with whom we had spent, climbing the Andes and sleeping in the desert and all that. We were, yes, there's in the middle. That's where we were. They were still meeting every week and once a week to talk about their experiences that were had in 1970s, 1980s. And the Rama group continued. It hasn't stopped. It's still attracting members, and it has become a movement of thousands of people in all of South America, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, in Spain. In part of them, they're already working in Los Angeles, but always with different kind of entities and beings that resulted very, very, very different than what we were at the very beginning. So when I saw what they were doing, I realized, I mean, these friends are kind of like under a spell. Because how can they still be, after 50 years, many of the contacts had broken away. They were not having like the kind of experiences and sightings that we had in the 70s or in the 80s, but they were still talking about that, and they were still doing the protocol exercises of the 70s. And in the meantime, I had met my meditation teacher, which is a meditation teacher from the Himalayan tradition. I told Daniel if he knew Swami Rama from the Himalayan tradition. And I started studying with one of his direct disciples, Swami Jay, who has been just an angel in my life, because with him I've learned to meditate and all that goes around. So I offered my friends in Lima, wouldn't you be interested in learning to meditate? Because I have this experience and I've been doing this experience, and I would love to share with you whatever it is that I know, because I sense that you would like to. I could sense them. They were not happy, because there was this feeling of being trapped in this format of communications. And some of my friends were antennas, and they were constantly gaining communications to do this, to go there, to open the portals and so forth, and this and that. But many of them had completely neglected their families. Some of them had like already kids that were in high school, and they were not celebrating Mother's Day. They were not celebrating Christmas, because they were so active all the time, traveling throughout the country, opening the portals and so forth, until they realized, man, there's something that is really wrong with all of this, right? This can't be. So we started in 2017 to do the regular traditional meditation, deep meditation, contemplation practices. And that's the group that is in 2020, 50 years later. And I really am grateful, very grateful to say that they took it very seriously, and that hypnosis that they were under from these many years of being in contact with these different waves of entities that were all sorts of, I don't even think that they were all just extraterrestrials in the sense that you see, the being inside their craft. And no, these were different dimensions, multidimensionals, and the descriptions of them were anything you can imagine. So that's what happened. And they started to meditate. And in 2020, I had opened a studio and we were doing meditation. I was teaching yoga I was teaching and training yoga teachers in Lima, and just being very happy seeing my parents, being with them close. And in 2020, COVID hits, right? And everything shut down. I had to close my studio and everything just went away. And unfortunately, both my parents that were very elderly and very sick, they both passed away with COVID. And since I was so close with them, I got COVID as well. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I can say that I'm very fortunate and that I was very stubborn, because even though I was in the hospital, I continued to do my meditations and my practices. With the help of God, just, I survived. And my children that are here in Switzerland said to me, Mom, why don't you come to Switzerland to recover your health? So in July of 2020, I got in a medical humanitarian flight, because all the flights and airports were closed in Lima. There was no airport. It was just a flight organized by the Swiss embassy, or a couple of Swiss residents that were still somewhere in Peru, and they got on the plane and we came to Switzerland. And it took me a couple of years, I would say like 2 or 3 years, to recover my health. But I have been in continuous communication with my friends in Lima. I should be going to Lima in the next couple of months to visit them and continue to do my meditation practices. That's what I do at the present. So that's in a nutshell. I try to make it very fast, the story of, according to Claudine's experience. I'm not going to say that's the story of Rama, but that's the story of Rama in Claudine's experience. Some of these, I'm gonna explain this to end the story with Rama. Is I have an acquaintance, he's a friend. His name is Klaus Honinger. He's an engineer and paleontologist in Peru, and he is well known because he fought against the Dakar. You know what the Dakar car races are? The car races in the desert. And the Dakar race was really very bad for the environment, because when they're racing through the desert, they were racing through the Nazca lines. I mean, things that nobody was taking care of anything. It was just so destructive. And he started to make really a lot of noise, because he said they're destroying the patrimony of this belongs to the world. This is not just Peru with the Nazca lines. This belongs to the world. And there's so many fossils that are, thousands of years old that you can dig out from the deserts in Peru. And one night, that was in 2006, he was working with 3 other German paleontologists, scientists. They were camping out in the desert, like I don't know how many miles down the south to Lima. And it was midnight, and they were about to go to sleep to the tent, when they see that from behind a hill from the ocean, light started to show up. And all of a sudden, they had this huge lentil craft on top of them. And they had these like little, how are they called, these that start to come out and they fly, and they were like moving around, kind of inspecting and monitoring the camp. They were so surprised, because they just took them, they were in a state of shock almost, right? And his wife, Klaus' wife, was there. So all of a sudden the craft lands, and they see that 2 beings step out of the craft. And the other scientists, they just drew back. And Klaus's wife, she started like screaming on the top of her lungs because she was afraid that they were going to abduct Klaus. But Klaus, with his scientific mind, he was not afraid. He was like fascinated because he saw these two beings and he locked eyes with the beings and they were in immediate communication, telepathic communication. And he asked them, he was excited, he wanted to, where did you come from? What planet? And they said, no, we're from here. We're your brothers. They were cryptoterrestrials. So yeah, beings that live underground bases. And they were tall, they were very lean, they had elongated heads, and they had 3 fingers in their hands and feet. So they're pterodactyls. And so he got a download of communication from the beings because they stayed very short because Klaus' wife was so exasperated and hysterical that it broke the communication. So they stepped back. Yeah, they stepped back. I did that illustration for Klaus. There's the beings. Is there the other one where he's... Yeah, that's her. Klaus Honinger, the Nazca. And that's him. So they left, and that was in 2006, and that marked his life tremendously after that. That experience. There was a film, like a documentary that was made that is on YouTube. It's not very good quality, but they made a kind of a documentary where he himself talks about his encounter with these beings and what happened next. So that is an introduction to the Nazca mummies as a whole, not a whole subject of different, but it's in itself and it's connected. That's why at the beginning I told you, there's nothing that is separate, it's all connected. And in Peru, the levels of phenomena that happen all the time, and Peru is a magical country. And these things are happening all the time. So you cannot say, oh, these are pterodactyls, these are mummies, it's just, I don't think that we are capable of knowing exactly what is going on because there's so much. And we're just starting to peel the layers of this experience of being at this stage of humanity to come back into contact with beings that are not from our humanity, but they're related to us because some of them tell us they come from the future. They're us in the future. They're humanoid. They're, long died. They're different types. But what I did understand is that, and this is my personal feel, you can agree or disagree with me, that's fine. But this is my experience that I took after this. I don't think that humanity is ready for disclosure in the sense of a contact, physical contact. I believe that humanity must know that there is life in the universe, that our self is in contact with everything in the universe, that we are one big family. If we are terrestrial, extraterrestrials, intraterrestrial, multidimensional, we're just one, right? That's what we need first to grasp and learn. And once we have established communication with our own self and realized who we are, then we can start establishing communication with one another first. Because to think that we're going to establish communication with some extraterrestrial, we know what humanity is doing at this point in the planet. It's crazy what is happening on the world. If we do not first learn to live with one another, how can we expect to interact with beings that come from somewhere else? I think that's why the ETs as well have tried to, in a good way, in a positive way, respecting that they know that we need time. And this has been like decades of efforts. At least that's why I say my experience has always been a positive one. I've never experienced anything that I would say was hurtful or scary in any way. Not with me. But that's what I think is important, that we work first on ourselves and we work with one another to get closer to one another, accept and be tolerant of one another. And that it will happen, because that's our destiny, that's our fate as humanity. Because we're becoming a cosmic family, but it has to be step by step. Thank you.
Wow, Claudine, that was absolutely fascinating, and so much wisdom there, so much applied wisdom. It's just lovely to have you, and I think we've all learned so much from that. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have got questions, so if people would like to make a comment or a question, Hyacinth just made one. If you'd just like to press the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll take it in turn. Daniel, can I get you to start off?
Yeah, I just wanted to, before we go to more dialogue, I just would like to ask Claudine to give just a very brief rundown of the Nazca mummies, because that's something that has we've been increasingly aware of that in recent
I'll do
years.
that. Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll do that shortly. The Nazca mummies were found in 2000, and just when I was back in Peru in 2017. A Huaquero is a grave digger, right, in the area from Nazca, showed up with this body that was covered with diatomea. It's like
That's the diatomaceous earth.
thank you, that's what it is. And trying to find who would be interested, and somehow it came into the notion that of these scientists, and they were saying, oh, these are extraterrestrial beings because they have 3 fingers and so forth. In the end, I mean, so many people got involved because Gaia came to Peru, National Geographic came to Peru, and they were all talking. And the Peruvian government just went bonkers and said, that's all a fake and this doesn't exist. We have never heard of anything like that of 3-fingered. When in reality, if you look at all the drawings of the Nazca lines, and you see the old textiles of the pre-Inca periods of the different cultures in Peru, all of them have drawings of 3-fingered beings with elongated heads. So that is part of the country. But in these, what is it? It's going to be 7-8 years. There's been so many scientists that have tried to prove they're fake. And so many scientists, renowned scientists, also forensic investigators from the United States, from other countries, genetic scientists that have been trying to test that say they're real. So it's a
weren't there a small number of fakes that were being brought forth at one point?
Add that to the whole story, because since they were trying to convince people that this is fake, so they started to do like papier mâché kind of dummies, and they would take like the head of a monkey and then glue it with they would do all sorts of thinking that people would say, oh yeah, they're just fakes, those are just dolls and such, including from one of the from the people from the Ministry of Culture. She was trying to get out of the country with these dolls, and they had dressed these puppets with like little dresses, and so they were trying to export them, like to take them to somewhere, and they stopped her at the airport, and it was in the news. But I have a hunch that they are real. One has to know the story of Peru. It's not so easy just to say, or they're fake, or just they're real, because it's just part of what Peru is, and the culture of Peru that is thousands of years old. And now with the story of Klaus Honinger, for me, that was a convincing factor because they look just like the mummies. The mummies are just like, like they're not mummies because they're not. A mummy has to be prepared. They take the organs out and so, but these are complete. Some of the, I don't know how many they have found, and just the vaqueros because they don't want to give away where they find them because it's like their golden egg, right? They're making a lot of money from that, so they're not going to tell anybody where these are coming from, which also makes it suspicious. But one of these, no, two of them of these mummies were pregnant, so they did tomographies and X-rays, and they have seen that their organs are complete. They're absolutely full, complete, and they have these elongated heads and like eyes that are, like the kind of, how do you call that, almond kind of eyes, and no nose and no ears, and yeah, I have been gathering information, and what I want to do, because if this is something that interests you more, I want to give you links. So it's not just Claudine telling you about it. So I will give you the links to the scientists, to the pages, to the websites, to the even email addresses. If you're so that interested, you can email these people yourself and talk to them, which I just did last week because I was gathering information for this topic. That I spoke to a forensic medical, a prominent doctor from, where is he from? Cordoba, from Argentina. And he did a very interesting study of the skulls of the mummies. And I spoke with him just three nights ago, and he said, "Look, Claudine, this is for real. This is not. They're not fake. They're real." So if somebody like him tells me that, I'm going to consider it, seriously. I'm not fully convinced because I haven't seen the mummies in person, and I'm not an expert either. So for people to say, "Oh, they're fake," you hear people in the internet, "Oh, they're fake," and haven't even seen them. They know nothing about Peru. They know nothing about. So how can they know if they're fake or not?
Wow. Thanks, Claudine. So much to consider, so much information.